Try to see it. So yeah, I was talking about how somebody had showed up in my life at a time where I was already in like a dark place because my heart was broken, dealing with a lot, and the person came in, and I was in a place where I was searching for answers. Right, my visions had already started roughly a year prior. And this person came in thumping the Bible, and I was like, it sounds interesting, but then turned around and treated me horribly while preaching Jesus, which is super frustrating to me. And it's like, not that it's a bad thing it's a great thing to talk about those things and to spread the word, but make sure you can walk the walk, you know? Confirmation. And it was a little disheartening. You know, and then my visions started up again a few months later. And I've been trying to understand, you know, why they started to begin with, right? And it was like I had spent about 10 years in solitude, just going through a lot of grief. And then I allowed another person into my life while I was still in that phase. Somebody that has a tendency to only date widows, oddly enough. And when I asked that person to leave my home a few months later, I started not being very good to myself. At the time prior to this, I had a company and brand new vehicles and motorcycles and purchased a home. I was doing very well. And that was after the loss of my fiance. So I was very proud of myself for those things, and then allowed somebody who didn't really have any good intentions for me to come into my home. Roughly about 2 months after I asked that person to leave, I stood up in bed one day and I looked in the mirror and I was like, nope. And I laid back in bed, thinking I was going to get through the grief and I was just going to take a week or so and just start healing. That was in September of 2022. Shortly after that, I recall waking up one evening and seeing something burn into my bedroom door that you couldn't see in the physical. It was like it showed up and then disappeared. And then after that, I started to be really bad to myself. Started allowing a lot of people that I wanted to, not a lot, a few people that I kept continuing to try and help that still had no good intentions for me, and started pretty much giving all of my things away. And 6 months after that is when the vision started. And I've been trying to understand what it all means, right? And it feels so important because I recognize the time that we're in, and it makes these things very relevant. And I want to talk to people about these things. It's just, you feel like you got to be mindful who you speak to. So I talk to myself a lot. And I do my videos, self-therapy, conversations with self and soul. And the Most High, obviously. It feels like for the last year something's been trying to shut me down from talking, and then I recognized that in my last couple of visions I was with the Most High one-on-one, and it wanted to know why I was allowing myself to suffer, which feels like a very important question. Well, technically I wasn't doing it to myself, although it appeared that way until I started to really consider what was going on, and it took me some time to recognize what was actually happening, because I don't know about those things. Something stepped in and finally assisted me in channeling for a higher power, because it's super important right now, because it's the Great Awakening, right? And technically, that's what's making it happen. People using things that they shouldn't be using, or trying to control others out of, whether it be greed or envy or whatever it is, so that they can try and take steps up. And it's like, do you even consider what you're doing to your soul? They live so much in the temporary that they don't consider the eternal soul and the kind of wounds that they're actually leaving on themselves. And then you recognize why Jesus would say, forgive them, for they know not what they do, when they're sleeping. What is your reason and intention for the things that you do? Should always be your first question. And if it's not in alignment with truth and having integrity and honor and respect for all things, technically the damage that you're doing on a soul level is greater than most people are even willing or able to yet comprehend. But thank the heavens, there's a global awakening happening that's reminding us and helping us all remember what we truly are and how important these things are. Another thing that Jesus said when you read and comprehend the book of Thomas, confirmation, is if you let out what is within you. I don't know exactly how to say it. He said it better. But what is in you, I want to say it perfectly. Let out what is within you, it will save you. If you don't, it will, I don't like that D word, I'll just say it'll harm, because words are important, they matter, quote unquote. And I'm in this place where I've been going through something of a spiritual nature for quite some time now, and my soul got tired. things I know that I need to speak about now, essentially so I can heal the soul and hopefully set it free, because I mean, isn't that technically that's what we should all be striving for, and then you recognize and understand. It makes me sad for many people that have yet to awaken. You understand too that everybody's on a different part of their soul journey. I like to say younger and older souls. I feel like older souls, we've incarnated maybe one too many times, potentially ascending in other lifetimes too, and then it's like, I feel like the ultimate goal as a human being, in my opinion, at least for self, is to become an ascended master. That it should be anyway. But that's when you have to recognize, like, looking at it from the perspective of the soul and not the temporary human existence. Yeah, that's the thing too, is that you go through an awakening and you look back when you awaken fully at the entire course of our history, and then you gotta pray that these things go good, because we never really know, right? People still have free will and choices and decisions to make, and you pray that they'll first ask, reason and intention for any choice or decision that they make, and pray that it's in alignment with truth for the highest good of all things. But again, that's a choice to even take the time to do that. There's a lot more to elaborate on that, but now is not the time. And then I gotta say that you gotta recognize too that these things, we're all always being spiritually tested, and not everybody's consciously aware of the choices and decisions that they're making at the time. And then you go through an awakening, you start to look back and be like, oh, that's why it all happened, and that's where you learn gratitude, which is why they talk about gratitude being so important. And it's that delicate dance between light and dark. We're always teaching each other something. And you learn to be thankful for those lessons. And then you want to try and recognize how spirit maneuvers in and out of everybody all the time. Characteristics, personality traits, whatever, makes people feel more comfortable. And can you recognize in the moment what kind of energy that you might be carrying, and what the task is of that energy, and how best to express that. It's a difficult thing for most people, and I recognize too, again, that, like I keep saying, I woke up very fast, so I feel like I need to be mindful with how I speak, even though I'm technically just speaking to myself right now, kind of. And you're speaking to your phone, but just. it's a challenge when you go through the awakening and recognize you start to gain that spiritual discernment and the energies that people can embody, hold within them. And there's a challenge in that when you become consciously aware of the way that it works, because of the fact, if you're not a healed version of yourself and haven't sat long enough to know thyself to recognize the way that those things work for just some, which is why like suppression doesn't work. It can actually make them pretty paranoid. I feel too that's why like when my awakening happened, like I had the visions and then I don't know, like I woke all the way up. It was like something stepped in and was like, sit and just meditate your way through this. So that's what I did. And I would challenge my thoughts. I would challenge my subconscious thoughts. To the point now I can even feel when they're coming up and I'm like, nope, let's just get rid of that one altogether. And I'm in this place too, right? Because I went through an awakening. I'm like, I just want to sit and philosophize with people. That's my new word. I think somebody else came up with it first, but I love the word. I feel too that we kind of got, like, we stopped doing that for a long time, and now we're in a cool place where this awakening's happening again, and maybe we can start doing it again. And the awakening can be a little disheartening too, because you recognize, like, back in the old days, they understood the journey of the soul. And it's like, what happened? It's like you think hard enough, but you don't even think hard. We know what happened, and it's sad, right? I feel like that's a topic that should be careful discussing. But then, bread of life and whatnot, and you realize that most people that aren't looking for, if you're on a different frequency, they're not even looking for videos like this, because not everybody's ready or willing or wanting to wake up or face truth. So many of us, self-included, for a long time, were told just, this is the way it is. And then when you start to look at it through the lens of, honesty and truth, and so I'll say, like, when it comes to, like, the biggest belief system, right? The story doesn't make any sense, technically, and the way that I see it. There's the S name, which is really a title, which means, accuser, or God's Attorney General, if we're being honest, and even in the good book, it says that God asked him to come down and test certain individuals. So technically he's not the E-word one. He also works for the Most High. And then I feel it comes down and tests, and it's, what do you choose to be as a person? Do you choose to allow the energies that are inside of you that are unhealed to determine what you will be, becoming a DEV instead of something higher that can see from a higher perspective? Or do you choose to sit to know thyself and come from a place of honor, integrity, and truth, respect, honesty, and choose to really work also for a higher power and share these kind of little tidbits of information? And I had to recognize too, like, they say that, and they don't say, but in the King James version of the Bible, it references the morning star twice. Once is Lucifer, the other is Jesus. So then you're like, then you got questions about that. But then you look at Jesus too, and while he spoke truth and was trying to bestow knowledge and wisdom of the things that were wrong in society at the time, making him a little bit of a rebel. But at least he came from a place of honesty, integrity, truth, honor, respect. May have gotten a little... He said things with authority because he had the right to carry it, because he came from a place of the heart, which is the seat of the soul, not the mind. Which is a beautiful quality to embody. And then you recognize too, when you start doing research, that Christ wasn't actually Jesus' last name. It was a consciousness level that one could choose to carry within themselves when coming from the heart space rather than the mind. Do you choose to be controlled by the mind, or do you choose to step into a higher frequency and vibration and live from the heart space? And you gotta look at too, I think another thing that kind of made me a little sad was you look at like imagery, right? From the times of Christ, and you see the angels and things like that, and so many of them are crying. And then you go back to the beginning of our species history, and you see like the Sumer birds, which have what's called the pineal gland. They're never crying, but they understood the journey of the soul. And then you gotta ask again, what happened? Where did we go wrong? And it seems so obvious, but are we at a point in our species history where we're ready to acknowledge those things, overcome those things, start opening up a dialogue and conversation so that we can heal the generational and ancestral wounding that's been done on this planet and essentially set all the souls free? But, group effort. Oddly enough, ever since I've been waking up, I keep getting this pain in my rib cage. I don't know why. I've seen that there's some other people going through it too, and maybe it's just part of the whole awakening process and remembering and soul remembrance and the body reacting and potentially. Right. For me, I feel like I was gifted with a rare opportunity too, because of like when my vision started and why they started and what led me to finally sit and do so much research so I could understand what was happening. You go back to the beginning of time on this planet that we know of, and you start to understand the stories, and I was trying to understand. I was assisted in understanding the way that I feel things are meant to be looked at is, can you recognize the energies that from the old gods up until, we went to the just one, which if you understand the teachings of Christ, he actually spoke of the Heavenly Father, which wasn't a man, it was an energy. And he also never called himself God or a king. It's just that he was an awakened soul that could see through the illusions of the time and was willing to challenge those for the betterment of the communities that he was attempting to assist, which, truth be told, just agitated some people's egos, and then you recognize who the DEVs of the time were. Right, and I find myself like I cry for Jesus these days. I mean, how can you not? It just leaves me with a lot of questions, And it's like, what happened? It's like, well, we know what happened. They were jerks. Hi. Technically, Jesus was a light bearer. Say that one in Latin. Or Spanish. We're in America, same thing with light bearer. Say it in Latin, it's Lucifer. You just say it in Spanish, Jesus, morning star, or Venus. They made it all seem very scary, and technically, I mean, depending on your perspective and the way that people can choose to embody certain energies that aren't yet ready to sit to know themselves, to be accountable for what and who they are, it can be. But it's also something that we can overcome when people start to speak the truth about the way things truly are and open up a dialogue and communication with each other about how do we heal. And I feel too that because spirit is a thing, obviously, I mean, you see it every day in people, But it's also just like there's light and dark in the physical that we can see because it's currently manifested in a physical form. There's other energies that can also influence the field that we are not able to see. And I feel it should be respected, not feared. We come from spirit, we go back to spirit. We have personality traits and characteristics while we're here, aka the spirit. I don't understand being afraid of it, even though we were told for so long that that's what we were supposed to. And then when you really sit and think about it, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Respect goes much further than fear, if we're being honest. And some people like to tell themselves that it's the same thing, and they're not even close. People may fear a bully, but nobody respects a bully. They just, truth be told, they just don't like them, and they're just like, that therein lies the difference. And I think it's exciting that we're going through this awakening now, And that you recognize too it's an awakening, and that means that the promise was that, truth would start to come out, and truth can't stand in, or lies can't stand in the face of truth because they can't, because then they sound silly when they're trying to talk about the things that they think that they know, and it's like, well, be able to catch me every now and then and be like, so this rare opportunity, right? While trying to understand what I was going through and why the visions happened and why I had been through so much in my life, it led me to start researching a lot about as much as I could. And the place that I was in at the time, just losing everything and being stripped of all the material things, which I gotta say I'm grateful for now, because now I'm on I'm on that spiritual path, right? And it's like I had all these things and this stuff at the time, but my soul was lost. It was hurt. It was suffering. And then I feel like that's why I had the vision where I met with the Most High, who specifically wanted to know, why are you making yourself suffer? And I'm just starting to be able to answer it and kind of look at like what happened, and I was like, oh. But then I started to like research, going back to like the time of like Mesopotamia and Sumer, and I watched a story about Anana, and I completely lost it. I broke down in tears because I felt like my soul understood that experience, because I was in this place where I was allowing people to come into my life that did not have good intentions for me, and I was just giving myself away to them, my energy, my money, my vehicles. And then it was like a higher power stepped in and was like, okay, well, time to learn a lesson. And he started to strip me down of all of those things. And now I'm in a place where I'm rebuilding from a place that's nourishing to my soul. I feel like I got stripped of all the things that life told me I was supposed to be. And I was so heavy in the grief at the time, and something stepped in and was like, sit and meditate your way through this. And then I started to, research things, and like Shakti, for instance, and I'm grateful for the fact that I was granted the opportunity to recognize these things and see how those energies were stepping in to help me put my soul back together. grateful for that. It's been a difficult experience, but also like I have so much gratitude. I feel like I sympathize with the gods, which is how cool is that? And I kind of feel like that's part of the goal. Can you look at our entire species history, recognize the things that you've been through in your life, and see how you relate, and then resonate with those energies so that you can find true healing in your soul. And I feel like that's what brings the whole big puzzle of our species together, is for those that are able to sit and go through that and see those things and then still come out with Christ consciousness and move from a place of love and honesty and integrity. And that's a difficult thing to do when you've been through a lot, right? It takes really sitting and going through the pain. You know, you go back to the beginning, through the gates, and go through that mental and emotional turmoil to truly come out the other side, seeing things from a higher perspective about how can I heal truly so that I can turn around and assist others to do the same, becoming an honest and true ascended master in the greatest extent, I feel. And who wouldn't want to be that? Yeah, I feel like you get to go back to spirit, and then you're one of the ascended masters, and you get to help from a higher perspective with humanity. So that technically, I feel, should be the goal of most people. I mean, it's a choice, right? It depends on your soul journey too. Are you at the point where you've experienced enough through your lifetimes to actually earn that title? Like Hermes or Thoth or Jesus. And truth be told, it takes going through the 4-letter H word or lots of stuff or experiences to be able to actually get there. And now it's like, now that I'm getting through too, I want to channel for the divine and help people to see things from a higher perspective on how can we bring things together now, right? And if we're at the time of Revelations, that was the promise. And if you look back at other prophecies, like the Hopi, for instance, the Rainbow Bridge, it's bringing everything together, being able to look at our species history, acknowledge what was done, and how can we heal as a planet. Are we ready to open up those dialogues and have true conversations in honor of our in honor of our ancestors, and truly speak about these things, which, truth be told, won't be an easy conversation, because when you wake up to the soul, your mind may not remember we can talk about it, but the soul feels it. And it was something I had to go through this last year, where it was like, I felt all of it, even though I couldn't, outside of what we know from doing studies and research and whatnot. When you wake up, the soul starts to remember, and that's vastly different from mind memory, obviously. Also, different neural network from the rest of the body, for a reason.